Yes guys, what is going on? It's Speci here, and today we are going to look at the Gwent Price of Power expansion. We're going to talk about it. How's it done? How's it performed in terms of average viewership? What has the data on the metas said the game has been like? And where do we go from here? First of all, I'm just going to start off by jumping into the monthly average viewers for Gwent the Witcher card game on Twitch. The reason I'm using Twitch stats is because this is the best metric I have access to. I don't have access to how many people play each month, but what I do have access to is how many people are watching. And as a Twitch streamer, I can give you probably quite a lot of insight into these figures and what the big fluctuations are to do with, etc. Let's start off by looking at November 2020. The reason we look at November is this was the month before the Way of the Witcher expansion, and in December the Way of the Witcher expansion happened, which was the last big expansion we've had for Gwent where order cards were released at once. That means in the whole of 2021 we had just one expansion split into 3 parts. Now, I don't know about you guys, but that ain't great. Admittedly, we had one right at the end, so you could sort of say it's 2, but man, like one expansion, not great, first and foremost, let's be very fair. It was split up, which made it, last a lot longer. But anyway, the point is to say, how is Gwent doing right now? And as you can see, invariably after an expansion, there's going to be a drop in viewership. We also had Maddock released around this time, as well as the leader cards, things like Fold Test and Horson Jr., which helped keep the game fresh despite not having an expansion. We know we've got another one of those coming up. We've got 12 new leader cards coming in December, which I'm really excited for. And then April, just steadily improving. Then we have May, which is one of the best performing months for Gwent, I think, in all time that wasn't an expansion drop. This is not including beta Gwent. This is Gwent coming out of beta and Homecoming. So why was the game doing so well? Well, there's a very diverse meta at this point in May. There was things like Monsters had 3 competitive factions like Vi, Arrakistorm, Kelly. You also had Life Coach returning because there was Masters at the start of June. So there was this big hype around Masters. There was the big hype around the big expansion drop as well of the new, the future of Gwent with the optimism, about the routine expansion drops. So we're pretty excited for that. And then June happened where Price of Power was finally released. And unsurprisingly, it was the best performing month of Gwent all time, guys, in Homecoming. I'm not including beta Gwent. We're talking post-beta. This is the best performing, at least in recent memory, of Gwent. So why did it all go wrong? Because just a few months later, we had the worst performing month in a very, very long time, going back to March 2020, just a few months after our best performing. So why has this happened? How have we gone from the height of Gwent to the lowest point of Gwent in recent memory? Well, it's all to do with balance, in my opinion, of the expansion cycle. Obviously, this was the Gwent team's first attempt at splitting an expansion into 3 parts. And the first part in June, we had some cool things. But around this time in August, we had the big relic meta where the second set of relics got released and the meta just went kind of crazy and it was pretty unenjoyable to play. So the balance has obviously gone a little bit dodgy with the change in sets of just like releasing 1 expansion split into 3. But let's take a look at the data itself, because as we can see, where we're at right now, October, the game isn't really doing that badly. It's not doing badly, but it's not exactly thriving when you consider back in May, it had, 400 or so more viewers without any new cards released, because October was a release month. So November we're looking at soon. I would imagine it's going to be probably quite close to September, and we've got to work on how can we get Gwent back, on that upwards trajectory. So let's take a quick look at all the balance changes or the meta, really, the meta reports, if you like, from CDPR themselves. We've only got access to these recently. They're quite confusing, I think. Basically, you've got a whole bunch of data here, but the only bit that's even worth looking at is this part over here on the far right, because this is the pro rank data. Now, I personally think there's got to be a better way of finding and reporting data from CDPR's perspective, because pro rank is so bloody ginormous. It is quite ludicrous. You have the very best players playing in pro rank and some absolutely terrible players. Just an example, my friend Not Rashid is a pro rank player and he plays like the worst decks I've ever seen. So there's an incredibly vast range of players in pro rank, and I think there would be a better way to record this would be like top 300 players, right? You get a much better idea of exactly what's performing at the highest level. So again, it's quite difficult to really look at exactly what's happening. But as you can see, somewhat healthy. Like, you've got quite a lot of decks above 50%. Obviously, Jackpot, Force of Nature, Reckless Flurry, Imprisonment, Inspired Zeal, Pirate's Cove, Pincer, Line Pockets, all on top quite significantly. And then you've got Blaze, sort of like, and the rest. So that isn't ideal that you've not got that, but that's just kind of what we come to expect. But this was a high performing month. It was an expansion month, and considering there was an expansion release, okay, only 24 cards, it went reasonably well, and that's to be expected, because if you're testing this from CDPR's perspective, you're just testing the new cards with the old ones. There's not too many new interactions and things like that. The problem, I think, comes down the line where it's the second drop, right? But then the following month, I'm not exactly sure what happened here, because Force of Nature just went from 0 to 100. So this is the month after June, obviously July, where there was a balance change rather than a whole big shift. This one. So Force of Nature was well out on top, had a huge play rate. Not really too much to look at, because this is really where all things tend to go wrong, because we're going from July, which was not any new cards, to August. We're expecting to see a big jump, hopefully matching or getting close to this one in June. But alas, we go from 1,352 average viewers to just 1,495 average viewers. Now, what I would imagine happened in this month is the start of the month had a big boom, and then the end of the month had a big crash, because this was the month where Fruits of Iskith had a 60% win rate. The second set was dropped. The rather than just having 4 relics, there was 8 relics, right? I think Gurney was released this month, if I'm not mistaken. They had to hotfix it, and even then it was still quite busted. This month had a huge impact on the performance for Gwent, because loads of people lost interest in playing it. Because the following month, look at this, you've got a near 50% drop in viewership. Again, I would very strongly imagine the start of August had a big boom, and then later on in August, people stopped to play as much. So even with a patch, it wasn't enough to draw people back into the game. They were just a little bit too fed up, and maybe the balance patch wasn't doing enough to change. Well, let's take a look. The following month, as you can see, Fruits of Iskith still really near the top at 54%. But then you've got Nature's Gift, which is creeping into it as well. Reckless Flurry, White Frost. So this month, seemingly a lot better in terms of balance. So why is the viewership so ridiculously low? And as I say, there was no new cards, and I think the previous month was just so bad that people really just weren't motivated to play. This is the worst performing month for Gwent on Twitch since March 2020. As you can see, it had been steadily climbing. Okay, there was some dips while we're waiting for some expansions, but this year had all been steadily climbing. At some point, some drops were somewhat inevitable, right? But considering this was sandwiched between 2 expansion drops, the second and the third, not what you want to see. Now, finally, the last one we have access to is the Season of the Cat, which was last month, where we had the final card drop. And as you can see, Pincer Maneuver with the Meditating Mages right up there. Reckless Flurry at 56, with Fukusha just improving it. And if you just look, Reckless Flurry has been constantly near the top, except this month, for the whole flipping last 5 months. And that's kind of boring, right? Like, Battle Trance, though, is getting up there, which I love to see. You can see Rage of the Sea and Blaze of Glory. So this is really positive. If you actually look at the amount of SK leaders that are being pushed up, like, they have a bunch of really playable leaders, and that's really exciting. But Reckless Flurry is just too good for some reason. Like, the leader just needs to catch a nerve quite clearly, but it hasn't. So this is one thing I'd like to touch on. I would like to see in balance changes, more leaders getting more drastic changes. I'm looking, for example, at Uprising down at 38% win rate. This needs to be improved, mate. That is not good enough. Like, just something seriously needs to give. And obviously Inspired Zeal is just so much better than these anyway. Like, it's not just about nerfing leaders, it's about buffing them. I want to see more changes to leaders more frequently. And yeah, like, I mean, this one, like, you look at how well it did okay. But you had Nature's Gift, Flurry, Pincer just like really out on top. And then you're not looking at Syndicate. Like, Syndicate isn't a real faction. And you've only got 1 option for Squirtle. You've got 2 for NR. And then Nilfgaard's kind of like looking pretty balanced. It's just got like some mid-rangey things. But here again is the problem with the data that we're looking at. I know for a fact that Nilfgaard had a massively high win rate amongst the top pro players. So this way of looking at the data just isn't really that effective. And I hope that balance changes are done based on data that is not just this, because pro rank is so bloody huge, right? If you look at tactical decision, a bunch of people play mill decks of this leader, right? So in pro rank, it's going to massively lower its win rate because mill sucks and people suck with mill. Like, so using these, this metric of just pro rank, I don't think is really very valuable. Like, we've got this big graphic and I'm only looking at one side of it. And even within this, there's like all sorts of like data. I'm just looking at like, So I wish there was a better way of looking at the data. Overall, what was the point of this video? Well, just to highlight the fact that despite having these 2-month drops, there was the biggest drop in Gwent viewership in September, so something has to change. What do I want to see moving forward? Well, I think this card drop we've got coming up in December is really exciting, with some old leaders being made into gold legendaries. That is at times all you need, I think, in Gwent to keep things fresh. But this is great, but there needs to be significant changes to the balance. There needs to be a serious uppull and no more printing of OP cards. I'm looking at cards like Fukusha, right? I just don't like having these cards that are in every day. Even a card like Simless, I would argue, is not very healthy for the game, because every time I go to build a Scoia'tael deck, I go, right, Simless. Cool, get in the deck, mate. I'm going to do another video, I think, where I talk about cards I don't like the design of. If you're looking forward to that, let me know. If you did enjoy the style of talking video, let me know. What do you guys think about this expansion drop? Was it a success? I think overall there was definitely some positives. Like the more routine content was great. However, the balance left a bunch to be desired. And as full disclosure, I have been involved as well in some of the PTR balancing for this expansion. So I can just tell you for a fact, it is pretty difficult, right? When you get 24 like cards that are sort of tied, if you like, to the other previous 24 cards, and then they are introduced into the game, it's quite difficult to really get an idea of exactly where the balance sits at. So having a one big expansion that you can just test all together at once seems like a better approach. I think like one criticism people have had is that this expansion felt like one big expansion split into 3, and a better approach would be maybe to split the expansion into 3 or into 2, but actually have each part separate from the other independent, so you're really pushing an archetype with each drop or so. Or even just, you know, you could print 4 Northern Realms cards that have nothing to do with each other, you just push one deck. But personally, I would love to see the return of more common drops, but bigger expansions. So things like these leader drops with Foltest, which we had back in April, March time, and the one we're having in December, I want to see more of those. And I would like to see the expansion maybe split into 2 parts as opposed to 3, so we can have more consistent content, but the expansions can still feel really hype, and there's plenty of time in between to get the balance right, because I do think the biggest issue has been the balance. So hopefully that can improve going forwards. What do you guys think about where Gwent is this expansion cycle? And also, did you like this video? I wasn't really sure what to upload, so I thought I'd give this a spin. Hope you found it interesting and not too boring. And yeah, like the video if you enjoyed, and take care. See you on the next one. Bye. Thanks.